Tuesday of the first week in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the first book of Samuel. Hannah rose after a meal at Shiloh and presented herself before the Lord. At the time, Eli the priest was sitting on a chair near the doorpost of the Lord's temple. In her bitterness, she prayed to the Lord, weeping copiously, and she made a vow promising, "O Lord of hosts, if you look with pity on the misery of your handmaid, if you remember me and do not forget me, if you give your handmaid a male child, I will give him to the Lord for as long as he lives. Neither wine nor liquor shall he drink, and no razor shall ever touch his head." As she remained long at prayer before the Lord, Eli watched her mouth, for Hannah was praying silently. Though her lips were moving, her voice could not be heard. Eli, thinking her drunk, said to her, "How long will you make a drunken show of yourself? Sober up from your wine." "It isn't that, my lord," Hannah answered. "I am an unhappy woman. I have had neither wine nor liquor. I was only pouring out my troubles to the Lord. Do not think your handmaid a ne'er-do-well. My prayer has been prompted by my deep sorrow and misery." Eli said, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." She replied, "Think kindly of your maidservant," and left. She went to her quarters, ate and drank with her husband, and no longer appeared downcast. Early the next morning they worshipped before the Lord, and then returned to their home in Ramah. When Elkanah had relations with his wife Hannah, the Lord remembered her. She conceived, and at the end of her term bore a son, whom she called Samuel, since she had asked the Lord for him. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, "My heart exults in the Lord, my Savior." My heart exults in the Lord. My horn is exalted in my God. I have swallowed up my enemies. I rejoice in my victory. My heart exults in the Lord, my Savior. The bows of the mighty are broken, while the tottering gird on strength. The well-fed hire themselves out for bread, while the hungry batten on spoil. The barren wife bears 7 sons, while the mother of many languishes. My heart exults in the Lord, my Savior. The Lord puts to death and gives life. He casts down to the netherworld. He raises up again. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He humbles, he also exalts. My heart exults in the Lord, my Savior. He raises the needy from the dust. From the dung heap he lifts up the poor, to seat them with nobles and make a glorious throne their heritage. My heart exults in the Lord, my Savior.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus came to Capernaum with his followers, and on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. The people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. In their synagogue was a man with an unclean spirit. He cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked him and said, "Quiet, come out of him." The unclean spirit convulsed him, and with a loud cry came out of him. All were amazed and asked one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." His fame spread everywhere throughout the whole region of Galilee. The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from 1 Samuel 1, 9 to 20. Hannah, the future mother of Samuel, has come to the shrine where Eli is the priest, and she's pouring out her difficulties to the Lord. She is barren, while Peninnah, the other wife of her husband, has had many children. She feels almost as if she's cursed, and she calls upon the Lord to remove this curse from her. She's praying in silence, and Eli sees her lips moving but doesn't hear anything, so he thinks she's drunk, that she's making a mockery of this. She explains what's going on, and Eli all but apologizes and gives a blessing to her. In fact, Hannah does become pregnant, and she fulfills the promise that she made when she was praying to the Lord, that her son would be dedicated to the service of the Lord, that he would be a Nazarite. And in fact, Samuel, her son, is a judge, a priest, a prophet, and a Nazarite. The Gospel is from Mark 1:21-28. Jesus goes into the synagogue in Capharnaum. Now, we actually think we know where the synagogue was in Capharnaum. Remember, Capharnaum is Peter's hometown. What happens in Capharnaum? A man with an unclean spirit confronts Jesus. Says, "What do you have to do with us? Have you come to destroy us? You're the Holy One of God." So notice, even though the people are not yet capable of understanding who Jesus is, this man who's possessed by a demon does know who Jesus is. Demons are spiritual creatures. They can see the reality that people cannot yet see. Jesus exorcises the demon out of him, and what's the response of the people? They're filled with wonder. They recognize that he has the very authority of God. He's not acting on his own. And this will be significant because the leaders of the Jews will later reject him, even though Jesus has given witness to who he is by his deeds. And may God bless us.